So, oops, what happened? Ah, here you are.
I started recording.
Oh, all right. So, so that's what's going on in the Vedas. So in the beginning, India was not believing in reincarnation. They were just having the same idea like the Greeks and so forth. I mean, you know, there is this connection between the Europeans and the Indians, and with the Indo-European language and so forth. So they share a lot of ideas. Anyway, like for example, you have Indra who holds a Vajra, and this Vajra is actually a thunderbolt. So like Zeus, for example, or like Thor, yeah. So all these thunder hurling gods and so forth. Anyway, so it was just like here in Rome or in Greece as well, no? And then only later on they came up with this idea of reincarnation. Why am I saying that? There was a reason to say that. I wanted to make something clear from this. I forgot. Why did I say that?
Marius told something about the last week.
Many
Oh,
people not believing in reincarnation. Maybe you wanted to say that it's a more advanced religious idea.
yeah, maybe it was that. I don't know. I forgot. It's like that. Too bad. But for sure, I had a good reason to say that. Why did I say that? Anyway, forget it. Um, yeah, no, that's what I wanted to say. Now I know what's up. Uh, so the thing with reincarnation is that reincarnation can, for some people, be a relief. Because if you believe in reincarnation, then actually, as I sometimes say, then you become cosmic. Yeah, you have no beginning and no end all of a sudden. Yeah, so you're very different. So death is no longer a threat of you being completely extinct. Yeah, so many people go for religion because they are really afraid of the great nothing, of getting completely oblivious, completely extinct at death.
The
So then you
religion,
either believe in a paradise after this or something. So this is for India by now. This is no longer a topic. You have come out of many lives. You will go into many lives. You from that point of view, I sometimes say you're immortal. You cannot die. Your mind cannot be destroyed. But
uh,
everything that you think you are, like a man, a woman, from Romania, from France, from England, a human being or not, everything that you identify with will completely die. And that what will not die, which is the continuity of the mind, you have no experience with. You don't know your mind. So while we are kind of indestructible or while we are immortal from that point of view, everything that we normally identify with will completely die. So we are very much mortal. You know what I mean? So, um, so when you have this idea, then the question is no longer what if you live on after death or not, if you will be destroyed in death or not. So the question is simply how do you live on after death? And so in India they came from this mythology with these gods and so forth, and then they came up with reincarnation, and it was a new idea. It was something invigorating. It was something cool, kind of wow, you could influence future lives, and that's amazing. And then the next step was, but there's no end to this kind of rebirth, and they all bring the same thing, and they all bring birth, and then you have to grow up, and then you have to fight again, and then you have to go through all your problems, and you have relationship problems, and you die again, and then you're born again, and then you die again. And in between, you get sick, and you have all kind of problems. So all of a sudden, it was understood that this rebirth is actually something that you don't want. They came from a level of believing like the Greeks or maybe the Christians or whatever, to a level of believing in rebirth, which is a completely different world universe that you're living in when you believe in rebirth, into the idea that you want to get out of this universe. You want to break the chain of rebirths. And then all of a sudden, this new universe where you could take on many, many different forms and many, many different lives and states of mind, being gods and being animals and being humans of all kind of rich humans, poor humans, and whatever. All of that all of a sudden became samsara, something to be overcome, because it is all unsatisfactory. And so that's what the ancient Hindu systems were aiming at. The Samkhyas, the Nyayaks, yoga was originally also a system for gaining liberation and so forth. And so that's what they're looking for. They don't call it nirvana in the Hindu systems. They call it moksha, which is nirvana means to be blown out, which means all the suffering aggregates, all this cycle of rebirth is blown out like a candle being blown out. But for them, I think moksha is actually the term for liberation. That's what in Hindu systems they would look for. So that's I find this very interesting. That they had a completely new idea, a new perception of what a human being is with rebirth, kind of really breaking into a new universe, new vision. And then the next step, I wonder how long that took them. The next step was to understand that this is unsatisfactory, that even this new universe, although it's amazing, what this means about each and every individual in that universe actually has to be overcome. I think for many people in the West it can be similar. They come out of a society that teaches them that there's only one life. Let's say science says that after death there's nothing, and you can believe in something eternal because the God is granting to you a paradise or something. But then to really have this idea that you in your essence are indestructible, that you have no beginning and no end. Yeah? This is already a big step for people, and it can be first of all very invigorating, or it's opening their horizon. It gives them a different meaning to to their life, gives them a different meaning to the different perception of the universe and so forth, or like the what the whole world is actually about. But then the next thing is to understand. Then comes the next step to understand that this even needs to be transcended. You have to go beyond that. And of course, for us in the West, we have to make these steps, because when the Buddha came, then India already had established this idea of reincarnation. That's what I like about this birth story of the Buddha, because the first part is that he is in the Tushita heaven and is teaching to the gods. And then somebody approaches him and says, like, Lord, the time has come to teach. The time has come to incarnate into this human realm. And then it says that the Buddha checked everything. He checked the time, he checked the mother, he checked the caste of the mother, he checked the society and so forth. And then he came, because it was a specific moment. He went to a specific people, a people that already believed in reincarnation. So that's quite interesting. So that's why he didn't come to us, because we don't believe in reincarnation. We didn't find that. So anyway. Yeah, so shall we then talk about that, or what do you want to do? You don't have any questions, I understand. No questions? Good. Cool. Then I just chat away a little bit about this level, because to some extent the small scope is still in this area of being fascinated with the universe of reincarnation. Yeah, do you understand that you have so many possibilities what you can be in the future? So many things like the traditionally, not traditionally, or like Buddhism is talking about, that there's God realms, there's paradises and so forth. They are all karma fueled. That means you get there due to a certain karma, and that's because they're karma fueled. When the karma has been burned up, then you're going to fall out of this realm. So it's nothing like an eternal paradise or something like that. But it's simply that the mind can take on states which are highly blissful, highly peaceful. Has all kind of appearances of objects which are very attractive and so forth. Then there's other realms described of a God existence which is made out of concentration. There's even realms where you don't have a body. You take a rebirth, but you don't have a body. So therefore, actually, within Buddhism, reincarnation is a little bit limited, because incarnation is into karne, no? Going into the flesh. So in Buddhism, rebirth does not necessarily bring you into a flesh, and so forth. Yeah? So there is all this kind of God realms, or you could think about, I want to be. Some people are healthy, some people are sick all the time in the human realm. So I want to construct a life in the future where I'm not going to have sicknesses, where I'm going to be healthy, maybe wealthy, maybe have a good character, and so on. So just to produce that, that's already very fascinating. And that's kind of what the person is doing in the small scope. He's playing with the tools of reincarnation in order to get a good rebirth, because he also becomes aware that there is low rebirth, like the animal realm, or worse things, yeah, like hell realms, or like I compare this often to a rebirth, which are like a never-ending nightmare. And we can all relate to nightmares. Maybe we have difficulties to relate to hell realms, but we can all relate to nightmares normally. So just imagine a rebirth which is started as just a never-ending nightmare. Because the nightmare feels very real, right? People are starting to sweat what they experience there in their dream. There's nothing in the room, no monster, no problem, no nothing. But people are having physical reactions to what they're experiencing there. So for me, this is very interesting when we talk about the hell realms, because it seems to be very much possible that you actually have an appearance, or well, a life, if you like, which is continuously horrible. So the guy says, of the small scope, I don't want to go to any of these, and I have the tools to actually construct a certain type of rebirth in the future. So he's playing within samsara, within the universe of reincarnation, which is already fascinating. And I would say this is already somewhat spiritual. But the Buddha is not interested in that. The Buddha is not interested in like, the Buddha is talking about how samsara works. It also talks about reincarnation, how reincarnation works, how karma works, what kind of practices bring what kind of results, and so why are some people beautiful, some people are ugly. Buddha presents causes for that, for just an example. And so the Buddha talks about these things, but he is not aiming at people getting a good rebirth. In order to, like, for example, a human rebirth is a good rebirth. So you need to have a human rebirth in order to be able to practice spirituality. That's the thing. So there's higher goals than high rebirths. A high rebirth is just a tool. It's not a goal. It's a tool for another goal. And this goal is to actually get out of samsara. So you try to get a good rebirth because you need a good rebirth in order to destroy rebirth. And sometimes I say, the person of the small scope tries to influence the death process. The person of the small scope tries to be a master of the rebirth cycle. But the person of the middle scope wants to destroy rebirth. He wants to destroy death. He never wants to be born again. He never wants to die again. So that's what the Buddha is actually aiming for. The Buddha says people who are in this cycle of rebirth are really in a very distorted mental state. Spiritually speaking, they are really in a horror trip, and this is not normal. This is not a healthy way of being. A healthy way of being is to be free of samsara. And so the thing is that as long as you're in samsara, as long as you're bound by these uncontrollably occurring cycles of rebirth and redeath and rebirth, your actual goal that comes out of the middle of yourself, which is that you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer. You want to be eternally, continuously, always happy, without interruption, and you don't want to suffer even in the slightest. This very goal, which is legitimate, which is completely okay with Buddhism, is actually at the center of Buddhism. This goal cannot be achieved within samsara. So you need to break the chain of rebirths in order to get that state that you're looking for ever since you existed. So since beginningless time, you're looking for this state of a lasting, unshakable bliss and peace. And this is not available within the rebirths. And so the Buddha describes all of this. Yeah? He describes why we are in samsara and what we're experiencing in samsara, and how there is a different reality, and how there is a nirvana, how there's a so-called true cessation, how there's a liberation, where all these the wishes that we have, the deepest wishes that we have, what we're actually looking for, how this is where this is actually available, where you can actually have this bliss and peace lasting forever. In other words, there is beings who are in that state. They have actually achieved what we are looking for. They are actually in a state of continuous peace and bliss. Just imagine that. You wouldn't have to do anything anymore. You wouldn't have to manipulate any situation. You wouldn't have to present yourself in a certain way. You wouldn't have to have access to any kind of materials or machines or gadgets. Wouldn't have to have any kind of substances or health or anything. And nothing is important. But you are simply, naturally, all the time in a state of being pacified, peaceful, and blissful, completely fulfilled. This is your nature from there onwards. This is your every moment experience. And then it goes even further. There is different intensities or different levels of peace and different levels of bliss. But all of those, like once you're out of samsara, there's many different levels. So you have the so-called Hinayana arhats. So this is those who have actually attained nirvana. Then you have bodhisattvas. Then you have so-called Arya Bodhisattvas. Then you have Arya Bodhisattvas on the so-called pure grounds. And finally, you have Buddhas. So all of those have different forms of lasting peace and lasting bliss. But they're always increasing. So that the Buddha is not just having a lasting peace and bliss. He has the highest peace, the highest bliss, the highest peace. So that's very interesting. That outside of samsara is not just one kind of state, but there's a lot of things happening out there. It's a huge world outside of samsara. So we talked about this, how we have this small world normally with our job and what school is telling us about the universe and so forth. But then you make one step out of this, and then there's the spiritual world, and you find so many different practices and so many different religions and so many different paths and so forth that you have to find the correct path. We talked about this at one point, huh? But you can say similar things with regard to samsara and nirvana. So, but once you step out of this completely crazy, completely unnecessary, crazy phenomenon of samsara, then there's many different states out there, liberated states, many different liberated states. Yeah, like as I say, the minimum state is that of this hero arhat, this Hinayana arhat, and then the maximum state would be the one of a Buddha. So the thing is that in order to get from samsara to nirvana, you have to do an incredible spiritual work. You have to walk a path. So that's how it's expressed there. We talk about paths, true paths leading to nirvana. And correct paths and so forth, which sounds okay. But what this is actually talking about is you have to completely revolutionize your universe. Your universe that was governed by reincarnation since unperceivable amounts of time. There was never another state for you apart from that which was this reincarnation after reincarnation after reincarnation. You were functioning according to this mechanism since like all your existence. And right that you need to destroy. You need to destroy the very mechanism with regard how you were functioning over the last eons and eons and eons, universes and universes. So it's going to be a huge task. The Buddha is bringing a real revolution to your life, or to humanity. So therefore, this path is not going to be just kind of a path you stroll down, but it's going to be a very difficult thing to do. So therefore, you need to be very motivated for this kind of path. And the motivation is very clear, again, coming out of this wish to be happy and not to suffer. So if you understand that your present state, how it works, and how this present state in its working, the samsaric state, how this present state is what we call is in the nature of suffering. It is unsatisfactory, is constantly giving you problems of all kinds of forms. Even your joy is in the nature of suffering, as the Buddha says. Only when you see that and you don't want to suffer, you don't want to have something that's in the nature of suffering from the bottom of your heart, then you will really long for an alternative. You will really consider nirvana. You will really consider, is there a different state? Is there something like is indeed lasting, fulfilling bliss and peace? Does this even exist? And how would I get there? So you have to be really motivated. And in order to get motivated, you really have to meditate on the unpleasant aspects of samsara. And that's, of course, a difficult meditation in itself. It's called the meditation on suffering. I mean, who wants that? Who wants to sit down and spend his time thinking about suffering? But there seems to be no other way. The only way to get motivated enough and to get the energy and to get the drive for really walking this long path to liberation is on the basis of understanding what you have right now is deeply problematic, is deeply, is cannot other than produce problems. Yeah, so problems in samsara is not something that happen to some people or are the exception. Problems is the nature of samsara. So, for example, this can actually be used in daily life. Like if you have problems with people at work or problems in the family, there's no surprise. It is not that you're a bad person or the people in your family are a bad person or the work. It's the nature of samsara. It's like this everywhere. There's no surprise. So you can. Sometimes we have problems because we're unrealistic. We expect things to work out. Things should be okay. But in samsara, they should not be okay. It's in the nature of samsara to not be okay. Problems are inbuilt in samsara. So one way to talk about samsara is by way of saying that we have so-called contaminated aggregates. So what this is referring to is that we have a body, we have feelings, we have a certain capacity to discriminate, to discern things, let's say an intelligence, if you like. Then we have many other aspects to our mind, and we have actual consciousness, and many different types of consciousness. So we have technically this is called a form aggregate, a sensation or feeling aggregate, a discrimination aggregate, a compositional factor aggregate, and a consciousness aggregate. And it's called aggregates because it's not one thing. Any of these five is not one thing, but there's many of these. For example, we have a physical aggregate. Yeah? We have fingers, we have organs, we have bones, we have a body as a whole, we have hair, we have feet, we have all kinds of things. So there's all kinds of things in this aggregate. And all of those are problematic. All of this can, for example, get sick, all of those age and so forth. Then you have many things in the feeling aggregate. So feeling is a problematic word, so we have to clarify this. It's not a feeling is actually in Buddhism, or this word sorva in Tibetan, is not talking about feelings like love and compassion or hate or something like that. It is talking about sensation in the sense of that you have a pleasurable feeling or an unpleasurable feeling or a neutral feeling. That's what the feeling is about. Yeah. So we have many different experiences of this type, even during one day. Yeah, we might have moments where we're very happy and so forth, and things seem to be easygoing and peaceful and harmonious, and then on the same day, it's going to be the opposite. Or actually also certain happy feelings might be there, but as time passes, this is another horrible aspect of samsara, they're going to wear off and you become dull, and then becomes a neutral feeling, and finally you're fed up with it and you have a negative feeling. This is inbuilt in samsara. Dissatisfaction is inbuilt in samsara. And then you have this discernment aggregate, and then you have this many other aspects of the mind, this compositional factor, and then you have the so-called main minds. Even the mind is not one thing, but is an aggregate. Yeah, you have an eye consciousness, an ear consciousness. You can see me and hear me at the same time. It's not that the mind is jumping from the eyes to the ears constantly, but at the same time you're seeing me and hearing me. And maybe you're reflecting what I'm saying, which is not even a central consciousness, is a thought consciousness and a mental consciousness, as we call that. So you have a whole heap of consciousnesses as well. At the time of death, all of those will dissolve, and there will be just this one consciousness of the clear light of death. But for the time being, we have these many different types of consciousnesses, which are all coming from their respective objects, their respective sense powers, and so forth. Yeah. So there's also a heap. So we have this many heaps here of different aspects to ourselves. And so they are called the contaminated aggregates because where did we get these heaps from? Why do we have this kind of minds? Why do we have this kind of character? Why do we have this kind of likes and dislikes? Why do we have these habits and so forth? So some of them are forming within this life, but even young children, you can see that they all are already kind of different from each other. They have a different character, they have different likes and dislikes and so forth. So all of this is coming from previous lifetimes, and there's karmas ripening into this kind of states of the mind. So that means that the present state is actually coming about due to karma. And this karma has been accumulated by a previous being that was already stuck in samsara and has its own patterns which came from yet further back lives and karmas from there and so forth. So that we are having this life right now is actually due to actions in the past that we did in the past, and these actions we did with our mind that is having all kind of flaws also, like for example anger or pride or arrogance or attachment or possessiveness or criticizing others and so forth. So all these kind of minds, all kind of these dirts or stains that we have in the mind, they are playing a role in how we are accumulating karma. So the karma itself that brings about what we are in this life, what kind of five aggregates we have in this life, what kind of body, what kind of mind, feelings, and so forth, coming from karma. This karma itself is coming from our so-called afflictions or delusions. So in this way, we talk about the contaminated aggregates because the aggregates themselves are coming out of our our, our, our dark sides, let's say, out of our afflictions. It's the afflictions that are producing the karma, and afflictions and karma together are keeping the cycle of rebirth going. So in the end, it's going very, very deep. Yeah, all these afflictions themselves, they have a cause, which is a very specific affliction. And this specific affliction, which we call ignorance, is actually an affliction such that we don't understand who we are. We don't understand how we exist. We don't understand how the universe around us exists. And instead, we making it up. We making up, oh, we are actually living, we are existing like this and this. The universe exists like this and this. So we are not just not understanding how the universe actually functions and how we ourselves actually function and exist, but instead we make up a fantasy world. And out of this, living in this kind of projection with regard to this very, I would say, essential things like how things exist. I'm not saying that we are fantasizing that there's a car standing in front of the house. There is a car standing in front of the house. We're not fantasizing about that we are human beings. We are human beings. But we think that we are human beings in a certain way. We feel, like literally, this would be expressed by saying we feel that we are human beings in and out of ourselves. Now, how can we be human beings in and out of ourselves when we were a fish in our last life? We feel very much that we are human beings, but actually we're just passing through. So we're kind of human beings, but also we are not human beings. But we feel like we are human beings. There's something inside of us that makes us a human being. And this is kind of coming from us. We are human beings. We are, I don't know, a man or a woman, and so forth. Yeah? Or we are intelligent. This is somehow in us. But we weren't intelligent in our last life. We might not be intelligent in the next life. So all of this is true. In this life, we are human beings and so forth. But we feel more than that. We feel we are more human than we are actually human. Anyway, so this is all touching on what is called grasping for inherent existence, or grasping for existence in and out of itself. It's a very difficult topic. The Buddha says the reality is an absence of such an existence in and out of itself. Things are actually just a dependent arising, or they are merely labeled by mind, and there's many different expressions. So this is a very difficult subject. And this is something that they're studying in Sera, and we try to do similar things here in Nalanda for a long, long time. My point here is just this. The Buddha is saying what we have, the life that we have right now, including that we get sick or that we have a very vulnerable body, that we will die, that we have all kind of, how you say, negative sides to us, like anger or jealousy or arrogance and so forth, attachment, desire, possessiveness, and so forth. All of this, yeah, this present state of what we are, these five aggregates, are coming from karma. We took them on. We have not always been like this. Yeah? In the last life, we were completely different. So what we are right now is because of certain karmic formations ripening into the present state. This karma was accumulated through those kind of crazy states like attachment and jealousy and so forth of previous lives. And these attachments themselves, that we even generate something like this. Why are we doing this? Why are we getting jealous? Why are we getting attached? It's because we have a misperception about how we exist, how the objects exist, how other people exist. And so what this misperception exactly is the difficult point. And actually, this is where philosophy all of a sudden plays a central role in Buddhism. Like if you say Buddhism is a religion, then there's many religious aspects to Buddhism, or you could say Buddhism is a way of life, and there's definitely a lot about ethics and how you like practical advice for daily life. But in the end, there is a very central point for philosophy, for actual definitions, for actual discussion, for actual debate, or really being very precise with how things exist and really exploring this kind of things. It has a central point in Buddhism. When I say Buddhism, I have, of course, have to say that I'm speaking about Gelugpa Buddhism. What the Geshe is saying very often, it is the Nalanda tradition. So this is not talking about our Nalanda, of course. It's the Nalanda that was a huge monastery in India back in the day. So out of Nalanda, the so-called 70 Pandits of Nalanda that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is speaking often about, they came and brought forth major texts, and some of them also came to Tibet and brought this very tradition, for example, of debating when they're clapping their hand and so forth. Yeah, this is all coming from this ancient monastery in Nalanda. So I'm talking, when you say Buddhism has philosophy at its core, I'm talking about this Nalanda tradition. No Zen Buddhist would agree with me that that philosophy is at the core of Buddhism. And I don't know what they're doing in Vipassana, maybe Theravada or something it is. Maybe they also would say that philosophy is not at the core. So here in this very tradition, in Gelugpa, it is Gelugpa, for example, another Tibetan tradition is the Sakyapas. They also are very into philosophy and into this part of really being precise in how the mind works and how at the basis there is this ignorance, not understanding yourself, the world, how things exist, and so forth, and instead projecting a fake reality. So how this really works and how this is actually to be refuted, or how you can get this ignorance out of your mind. So this is something very, very central and very emphasized here in Gelugpa. This is why we have these huge monasteries with 4,000, 5,000 plus monks studying. And the Sakyas at least used to have that. I don't know the state of Sakya Buddhism today. So I'm just saying all of this because I just said that that philosophy is at the core of Buddhism, and so I would hold this to be true, but other Buddhist traditions would not accept that. So just to give you this kind of context. So still, the Buddha is definitely teaching for a long, long time after his enlightenment. Yeah? So obviously he wanted to get across a message. He said a lot of things that need to be reflected upon. And many things that he said are not very easy to access or to understand. So there were so-called philosophical systems forming out of the teaching of the Buddha, the Vaibhashikas, the Sautrantikas, the Chittamatrins, and the Madhyamikas. And so they have different ideas about what is this ignorance, this cause of all the afflictions. What causes all the afflictions, therefore causes all the karma, therefore it causes the rebirth, which means that we end up with this contaminated aggregates, contaminated due to coming from karma and afflictions. So it's a very subtle topic, very difficult topic. And so something that definitely nobody will be able to tell you within 5 minutes or within an hour. So something to look into. And actually all what I'm saying right now about how these aggregates that we have are contaminated because they come from common afflictions, how these afflictions are coming from a misunderstanding of the world, and how this misunderstanding has to be eradicated in order to be liberated. Because if you get rid of this misunderstanding, of course, then there's no afflictions. If there's no afflictions, then there's no karma. If there's no karma, there is no birth, which means there's no contaminated aggregates. So if all of this is not happening, you're simply liberated. You're not going out of existence because you're indestructible. Yeah, your very continuity of mind, of being clear knowing, of having experiences of it is indestructible, but it will no longer take the shape of 5 contaminated aggregates. It will be out of that. Rebirth is ended. Why? Because you destroyed this misunderstanding about how you exist and how the world exists. The ignorance that produced the afflictions and karma and the rebirth. So this idea is actually used to be widespread in India. So there's another religion that exists today who has the very same idea, which is Jainism, the Jains. Ancient systems of the Hindu persuasion also had this idea, the Samkhyas and the Nayayikas or something like this. So this was common in India to look for what is this ignorance, what is this misperception about the world that we have that keeps us in samsara. And they came up with many different ideas. So many things that we do here and that they definitely do in Sera and in Gandhi and Drepung in India is dealing with this description of other religions about what is this ignorance, what is this misunderstanding. For example, there is a certain Hindu schools who say that the world is an illusion. All this world doesn't even exist whatsoever. So the world is Maya, illusion, and behind that is the actual reality, which is very different, which is Brahma. And you having a soul, an Atman, and this Atman is actually one with Brahman, but you don't know that. And if you would understand that, then the Maya world would dissolve, and you would be one with Brahma. So that's very rough, of course. What some people would hold is the problem. What is the ignorance. So Buddhism would describe things quite different. My point here is simply this: that there is quite some systems who have this idea that we are experiencing rebirth. Rebirth means that you're actually in a contaminated state. It means that you're in a contaminated state due to having contaminated causes for this rebirth, and the state itself, having this body, having this mind, is set up for producing problems. It cannot be other than dissatisfactory. It cannot be other than unpeaceful. It cannot be other than having only short-lived moments of some kind of superficial joy. There's no bliss or lasting satisfaction possible because you're having 5 contaminated aggregates. So they agree pretty much on this, and they all agree that this comes from karma and from afflictions. The question is, why are there these afflictions? What is the root of all of this? There's even systems that will say that reincarnation cannot be abandoned. You cannot get liberated out of this. You can simply constantly try to be born in the highest realm, like a god of the highest type. Mimamsaka says something like this. But most systems say like this: there is a root to the samsara. Samsara is unnatural. That you go through this constant identification with 5 aggregates, constant identification with a certain life, and then it's just over, and you identify with a new life, and then this is over, and the new life. This is unnatural. This is not in the nature of the mind. You can liberate yourself from that. And the question is, what do you need to understand? What is the path that brings about this liberation? So that's what the Buddha is interested in. The Buddha is interested in to explain to us how our present state is in the nature of suffering. He is interested in showing to us where this whole samsara or this whole contaminated state is coming from, what is the origins for that. He's interested to get across to us that there is an alternative, which he simply describes in a negative way. He says, like, the alternative is not that. It is a cessation of all of that, being free from that, being liberated from this kind of aggregate, this kind of rebirth, this kind of causes. And then he's saying that there is paths to actually attain this state of liberation. So that's kind of what the Buddha is teaching in the subject, which is called the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, so he's teaching that the true sufferings, the true origins, the true cessation, the true paths. And I said in the beginning, the Buddha is actually not interested to help people to get better rebirths, just that. He's really from the beginning interested to get people out of this cycle of rebirth. And we can understand this because the way he talks about rebirth is by way of the Four Noble Truths, the true sufferings, true origins, true cessation, true paths. And this was the very first thing that he has ever taught. When the Buddha got enlightened, the very first thing that he taught to a qualified audience, his previous ascetic friends, the so-called teaching, the preaching or the teaching in Sarnath, the very first thing that he taught was the Four Noble Truths. So he was talking to a very elevated audience. These five were doing all this asceticism practice, and they were really looking for a way out of samsara, for liberation. They were completely motivated. They were completely prepared. So to them, he said this. I'm not completely sure, but I think the story goes like this, that he simply said this. There's a true suffering, a true origin, a true cessation, and a true path. And one of them got it immediately. Then he said, the true sufferings are to be understood. The true origins are to be abandoned. The true cessations are to be actualized. And the true paths are to be practiced. So he gave a way to how you relate to these four truths. I think on that basis, some other people got it. So it's quite amazing. So we're just hearing this and you would get it. But it's already interesting because it says the true sufferings are to be understood. He doesn't say the true sufferings are to be abandoned. The true origins are to be abandoned. The true sufferings are to be understood. So you need to understand the state that you are in right now. And so this brings me full cycle back to what I said in the beginning. In order to do this very difficult path that gets you out of the mechanism that you have been in within your spiritual world and within your soul or within your mind, these cycles of rebirth, to get out of this mechanism, to really completely revolutionize your personal universe, to completely go a completely different way that you have never heard of before, you need to be strongly motivated. And you will be strongly motivated by really understanding the dissatisfactory state of affairs with this kind of aggregates. In other words, you need to understand the true sufferings. And so again, it's very unpleasant. It's a very unpleasant topic. Can be no doubt about that. Death is also an unpleasant topic, but they're necessary. They're completely crucial. And so one way that I approach this is by saying the Buddha is not here to tell me that I'm ugly or that I'm spiritually undeveloped or that I'm handicapped spiritually or that I'm ugly in my afflictions and so on. That's not his point. His point is he is really the closest, most intimate friend. He's really sitting down with me and saying, like, look, isn't it you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer? Isn't that what's motivating you all the time? And look, this is happening, and it's not working out. I feel like, look, I want to tell you that it's not working out. What you're doing is not working out, and I tell you, you did this in so many lives, and you're doing it again this time, and it's again not working out. And I want to talk with you about that. I want to talk with you about that what is most close to your heart, which is that you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer. And I tell you, it's not going to work here. You need to go somewhere else. And I need to describe to you that there is alternatives. You can do things differently. It doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to die. You have to die in this life, but you don't have to die in the future forever and ever. It can be very different. And that's what he's trying to do. And that's why he talks about my suffering. He's not talking about my suffering in order to point out that I'm lowly or that I'm completely undeveloped. He's actually taking me serious in my suffering. And he says to me, why don't you take yourself serious in your suffering? Why don't you just create a meditative space where you feel safe? Maybe you take refuge, you feel my presence, you get help, and then you look at it. Look at that, what you have been covering up for this whole life and for all the lives before. And you have this safety zone, and you read something about suffering, and you understand that this is talking about you, and then you take this serious. It's okay. You're suffering, and that's okay. It's okay to acknowledge to yourself that you're not perfect. It's okay to acknowledge to yourself that you're having faults, maybe even a lot of faults. It's okay to accept, to admit that spiritually speaking, you don't understand where you are. You don't understand who you are. You don't understand the universe. You actually been lost. It's okay. One needs to start somewhere. One needs to really kind of admit certain things to oneself before anything can happen. You cannot possibly rely on a doctor before you have admitted to yourself that you're sick. And this is exactly the image that Buddhism is using a lot. A lot. Buddhism is saying that spiritually speaking, yeah, even if we are completely healthy and strong and trained, and I don't know what sports and stuff like that, spiritually speaking, we are, well, let's say we are sick. And the Buddha is likened to a doctor. And the Dharma is, to the practice, is kind of likened to a medicine. And then there's the Sangha, which is talking about very advanced high practitioners. There are the nurses that help you to take the medicine, or sometimes I say they help you to apply the therapy that was given to you. Let's say you have to do certain movements or something like this. The doctor said you have to do this and that. So they help you to do that. So if we do not get to the point where we feel that we are spiritually sick, and because of that, we will never ever achieve our goal to be happy and not to have problems. And we will never ever get out of this cycle of being born, aging, sick in between, and then dying again and just starting all over again and again. If we don't admit to ourselves that there is something going badly wrong in our life or in our existence, then we will never ever try to rely on a doctor. We will not look for a cure, and we will not look for somebody to help us with applying the cure. So that's what this topic of suffering is about, you know. And what I'm saying is, one can really take this approach of taking oneself serious, yeah, really kind of like to some extent to have compassion and to have affection for oneself, real affection, not in the sense of I'm going to the fridge and have some chocolate or something like that. I'm going to treat myself well. I treat myself well by sitting down with myself and saying to myself, how is it going? What are you looking for? Do you have what you're looking for? What am I doing every day in order to get that what I'm looking for? Let's say I'm looking for fulfillment, or for being open and free, or whatever. Yeah, whatever, however you formulate it in your own words. And what am I doing every day in order to achieve that? And does it work? And if it doesn't work, why doesn't it work? So that's, I think, a very crucial thing in spirituality, that at one point you need to be able to be honest with yourself. You need to explore yourself, and whatever you find, is that what you found? You don't have to judge it immediately. You don't have to kind of reject it or say, like, oh my God, now I shouldn't have that. So you put something over it. No, this is what it is. This is what's going on. And again, it's a very, I would say it's a very private thing. You do this by yourself. You don't have to explain this to anyone. You don't have to share this with anyone necessarily, but you need to come to know what's going on in your mind. And you might find things that are difficult to bear. So you have to have the courage and the patience, and again, the compassion with yourself to hold that what you're going to find there. And the Buddha is definitely encouraging you to look at this. And this is the topic of suffering. This is the topic of the 3 types of suffering, of the 4 types of suffering, the 8 types of suffering, the 40 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and so forth. Very difficult, heavy topic. I mean, it's not difficult because it's intellectually very difficult. It's actually quite straightforward. But it's difficult to actually go there and remain there and look at that. I think what also is going on is this. Normally, if you, let's say you're wearing something in black, and you have a white dot or a hair or something there, and then somebody says, oh, you have there a little dot, you know, some liquid or something. You would look at it and you would immediately brush over it, and it's clean and it's done. Problem solved. So here you're going to find problems in your mind that you will not solve today or tomorrow. Yeah, you will find sufferings there that you will be able, you will have to, not really, like, you have to make friends with, in the sense of that you will have to find a way to live your life knowing that you have that. And you're going to work against it, of course. You will try look for methods and so forth. Some things indeed will go away immediately. Other things will go away after some months. Others will go away after years. Others you will die with. And you will have them in the next life. It will take a long time. Of course, the more deeper we go, the more often we encounter things that you're going to have for many lives. And the very root of samsara, this ignorance, you're going to have right until the end of samsara. It's going to take some time. But again, this is not in order to, how you say, make you all depressed or something like this, but just to prepare you that, that the Buddha is going very, very far, very far. And so therefore, you're going to encounter things that are problems you didn't know that these were problems. And then how you would work with that is that you are let's take, for example, anger. Yeah, anger is something that is actually painful. Yeah, so the Buddha will point out the drawbacks of anger, how this destroys positive karma, how it makes you ugly even physically when you are in anger, how it cuts you off from friends and so on. So he will talk about the negative sides of anger. But actually, so then he will invite you to stop anger, to not go for anger. And to some extent, this is rather easy when you understand that you don't have to be angry. You're completely free to choose if you're going to deal with a problem or with a frustration with anger or not. And on the other hand, you also understand that you're actually in pain. You're actually not happy. You don't have a happy feeling while you're angry. So out of a complete selfish, self-explanatory kind of observation, you can stop being angry because you don't want to suffer. I don't want to do this to myself. I don't want to be angry. Yeah? Even without reflecting on great outcomes of this with regard to your karma and so forth, yeah? Simply by understanding that it hurts. I'm not going to beat myself up just because this guy said something. Yeah, so you can get there, and you can actually stop certain levels of anger, I would say, rather easy. But attachment is very different. Because attachment is not coming with pain. Attachment is coming as your friend. Yeah, in anger you have it in front, yeah, and then there's this confrontation, attachment comes from the back. It sneaks in. It starts with, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, innocent. And then it builds up a story. It's not just beautiful, it's extraordinary. I should have that. I could use this at home. I should take this home. You know, this is, and you build up the story and you don't even see it happening. And in the end, you're in it, and you need it. And if you don't have it, you feel incomplete. And so you try to make it happen. And then somebody else cuts in between and buys it before you or destroys it or something. You get so upset with the person. And the root is the attachment. So attachment is much more difficult to see. And it actually comes also together with a joyous feeling, which is a joy or a happy feeling in the nature of suffering, because it's connected with an affliction. It's a contaminated joy. It's far from the bliss that the Buddha is talking about. So therefore, that's what we're actually looking for. We're looking for this kind of happy feelings because we don't have anything else in samsara, apart from these kicks out of attachment or making a big story about objects and so and people and so forth. So they say attachment is such that your mind gets kind of soaked into or kind of enters into this object as if you would take a piece of paper and drop a drop of oil on it, or let's say a newspaper, yeah? And that this drop of oil is completely going into this paper. You will never ever be able to separate this oil again from this paper. So attachment is difficult. Anger is pretty outspoken, straightforward, loud, painful. You can work with that. the coarser levels for sure. So attachment is much more difficult. So there will be some things that you find when you do introspection, yeah, when you check, when you take these teachings on suffering, that you can work with quite quickly, and it will improve your life right there. And this is such that even if you're not a Buddhist, if you're not taking refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, these kind of things can help you right there. And then there's other things which are a little bit more difficult. And then the Buddha is not just into improving your life in this reincarnation. The Buddha is, as I said, into destroying the very mechanism after which you are living since beginningless lives. So he is really into that problem which is at the bottom of all of it. This is even difficult to even understand, far from seeing it in your experience. It's going on, this grasping for inner existence, as this is called, this ignorance is called grasping for inner existence, is going on all the time, almost all the time. Well, it's a difficult topic, but anyway, there's an appearance of this all the time. And we cannot even identify this. We're seeing it all the time. We're constantly seeing things like when you look at the screen, for example, Buddha would hold that you're not just seeing a screen, you're seeing an inherently existent screen. There's an appearance part of what you're seeing which has nothing to do with reality. This screen is not inherently existent, it's a dependent arising. What you're seeing is an inherently existent screen. So there is levels, problems, or distortions in our perception in our life which are even difficult to just recognize. You can recognize attachment, you can recognize jealousy, you can recognize anger. But there's other stuff going on which is even difficult to just identify that is even happening. And the Buddha is actually interested in that level. That is what he wants to destroy. If you destroy that level, everything else falls dead by the road. Yeah. If you're able to destroy this appearance, or this bit, what's going on is that the mind is not understanding reality. Instead, it is creating a reality. So there's an appearance of so-called inherent existence, as if things would exist out of themselves. This is what appears. And then the mind who created that appearance forgets that it created this appearance and believes this appearance to be the truth about the object over there. And that's the ignorance. Believing in that what you have created out there, which is actually nothing new. I mean, you're when you, like, for example, in anger, if you have a, I'm sorry for kind of jumping around here a little bit, but I think today we're a little bit more loose. I don't know, jumping from one topic to the other, I don't know. So with anger, the description is that in anger, you're experiencing, for example, if you're angry with a person, you experience the other person as being an enemy. And what this does is that you experience the other person as being solely negative. This person is so negative, this person needs to be eradicated. Either needs to be kicked out of the company or needs to be punished. If it's going very bad, needs to be killed. At least it needs to be reprimanded. Yeah, something needs to happen. So because this person is so 100% negative. This is not the reality. There's nobody who is 100% negative. There's nobody like this. Something like this does not exist. There is no such thing. But you're experiencing exactly that. You're experiencing a person that is 100% negative. And this is because you're creating an appearance. But you're not aware of that. And then you believe your appearance. It appears like this person is 100% negative and something needs to be done because he's 100% negative, but that's just made up by you. Nobody is 100% negative, but this is what you're experiencing. What you're experiencing is not the person. You're experiencing your projection, and you have no clue about it. You believe your own projection. So that's already horrible with regard to anger. But the Buddha is saying the same thing is true for any affliction. When you're desiring something, when you want something really badly, in normal terms, you already create an appearance of this object as being so amazing, which it is not. It is maybe having this and this kind of quality is good, you can use it for that and that, so cool. This other object is not as good in quality, all true. But your appearance is that this is amazing, can't live on without that, need to have that. I already have 5 at home, but right now it appears like I need to have this 6th one as well. It's not like this. The object does not exist in this way. But it appears to you in this way. It appears to you in this way while not existing like this. So this already shows you made it up. But you forget that you made it up. You're not even aware. You don't forget because you have never been aware of that. And then you believe your own appearance. And you act on that because of that. You act on the basis of believing your own projection. And so the Buddha is going very far with this. He says, like, you're also projecting that things that are dependent arising and therefore are connected, interconnected, and are not existing out of themselves, out of a core, you're making an appearance as if they are not connected, as if they are having black lines around them and are cut out or something. It appears to you that they are really over there, that they are existing in and out of themselves, they're kind of coming forth towards you. You see them because they're kind of sending this and so forth. And this is also made up. And you believe this appearance. So that's what the Buddha is actually interested in. He tries to point out how things are appearing and how you're believing these things. And because we have this kind of appearance with regard, not just with regard of this person is positive or negative or amazing or disgusting, but how the very thing exists, its mode of existence, if it is a dependent arising or if it is inherent existence. So very philosophical, seems to be very, very abstract. But the Buddha says this is what is lying at the source of everything. All your behaviors, all your afflictions, all your accumulating karmas, all your taking rebirth and redeath and so forth is coming from that. That you are distorted with regard to how things exist. And you're projecting an impossible way of existing, and then you believe that. And if you think about that, becomes immediately obvious that if you are projecting a reality or a way of existence of reality that has nothing to do with how reality exists, reality won't shape itself according to your projection. Reality will just be reality and will function in according how reality functions. So your projection will constantly not harmonize with what you're experiencing. So that's a situation that can generate things like attachment and anger and frustration. Frustration, for example, yeah? Constantly, frustration is coming out of being unrealistic about how things are. You're frustrated that this work doesn't go more easy. Well, it's a difficult work. What did you expect? You're frustrated. Why are you frustrated? So this kind of things all coming out of not understanding how things are existing. And of course, this inner existence talking about a very subtle level. So anyway, that's what the Buddha is about. And I'm saying Buddhism will talk about many different layers of problems that we have in our mind. The Buddha will be interested especially in the most subtle and difficult level of the problems. He wants to eradicate that because by that you get out of samsara and you have the fulfillment of all what you're looking for, constant peace and bliss. But there is many other levels before, and obviously we need to start with the coarsest ones, and with the coarsest ones we can have very quick results. So there will be satisfaction out of the practice there. With other things, we have to be more patient with ourselves, and you could say also more compassionate with ourselves. The compassion is that normally the wish that the other person may be free of suffering. So our Geshe, for example, is not very happy to use the word compassion with regard to yourself. He really wants to keep this for others. But the attitude is similar. You can have this the attitude, may I be free of problems, of which I see a lot. Now that the Buddha, my very close friend that will not hurt me or has no agenda and so forth, yeah, he's not into being right or something like that, or being kind of a nerd or kind of telling you what he knows or something. He's really talking to you because he wants to sit with you about your core problem and your core wishes. So that person pointed out that I have this and this and this and this kind of problem. I check it out. I find some of what he's talking about. I can validate his teaching in my own experience. And then I can start to work with the coarsest one right away. And there will be a change. There will be improvement. And then with time, you will see more things. You will maybe understand the afflictions and the problems more, how they work, how they function. And then you can therefore break the process of these. As I said, the afflictions are all story makers. They all take an object and then project something, but they project this in stages. They start to they say something. For example, somebody says something strange to you, and you feel like, what was that? What did he say? Don't even know what he means, you know? And then it comes the next step. This guy is always saying things like that. I don't understand what this guy wants. Why can't he speak clearly? Maybe he doesn't want to speak clearly. I think he wants to kind of insinuate something. He wants to say something with that. I think he also looks at me strange sometimes, you know. And actually, I think he wants to harm me. He has a plan. There's something behind this, and I don't get it. And I'm not happy that I don't get what he's plotting against me. This guy is anyway strange. I don't like him. My gut feeling tells me this guy is bad. And it goes on and on. And in the end, he has only negative sides. So if you understand that, with regard to anger, with regard to jealousy, with regard to attachment, desire, and so forth, possessiveness, and so forth. You can understand, you can see this process happening with regard to every of this affliction. They're all the same in that. So if you see how the process works, like if you find this affliction, if you come to a moment where you see, I have this kind of attachment, or I have this kind of desire, I have jealousy, and this was an arrogant state, or so. I mean, you see that. If you identify the state, then later on you might identify it again more easily, and you remember what was the moment before. What did I think before? And then by identifying this more and more with awareness, by introspection, by also using the tools that Buddhism is actually really in detail defining what is jealousy, defining what is attachment, not just in general, detachment, wishing for something, but very in detail. So you can identify this in your own experience, and then you find out what was the step before, what was the cause for this fully fledged affliction, what was the previous moment, and then you start to see the story, and you can go very far with that, even without going into meditation retreats or something like this, just in your daily life. Yeah. And then you can see the story making, and then it can happen the other way around, that you catch yourself in the story making and you cut it right there. You know that if you don't cut it right now, it's going to be more story and more story and more story, and finally it's going to be the affliction. So you can cut it right there. It's very easy to cut it there. It doesn't have any strength yet. It doesn't have any power. You can cut it right there. And you stay calm. So that's good for your daily life, but this does not eradicate the root, which is this ignorance. So for this, you would have to do the complete path, the true path that leads to true cessation. Okay, full on. You see, anyway, I say full on, but actually it is full on. Yeah, what the Buddha is proposing here is full on. When you study Buddhism, at one point you understand what he has in mind. You get a feel for what's his plan, and you feel like, whoa, really? Oh my God, this is really full on. Really, so wow, really amazing. And that's just the middle scope. Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, do you have any questions or any remarks or anything? Are you still with me? Are you alive?
Now you're looking at me.
Great teachings, Tharchin. Very clear.
Yeah, so I don't know how to continue them, because I mean, obviously this was not a very thorough presentation of the middle scope, because there's clear stages and so forth. Yeah, anyway, but I mean, it's just discovering Buddhism, so we cannot go into too much detail. Of course, there's a lot to be said about these sufferings, actually what they are and how you would meditate on them and stuff, and then also what the path would be. Yeah, like the 3 higher trainings of higher ethics, higher concentration, higher wisdom, and so forth. And then what ethics is and so forth. Like, for example, there's the Pratimoksha vows, and they call Pratimoksha. There's the word moksha that are used for the Hindus. They don't say nirvana, they moksha. But in these vows, it's called Pratimoksha, self-liberation vows. So there's 8 of them, the monks, five types of monk vows for that, and then 3 types of lay vows. So that's all part of pratimoksha. You go for liberation. It's not part of the small scope. It's part of the pratimoksha of going for liberation. So there's a lot to be said about that. So I don't know if we shall continue with this level. I mean, we have to see how it goes on. I mean, I'm very happy to talk with you people as well, just the two of you. Makes it feel very intimate, I have to say. You don't ask much, I have to say, also. But I don't know. I mean, if this is an exception that there's only 2 people, and next time many people come again who were there before, then you have to check if they want to hear also something on the middle scope, because the things are building on each other. You cannot really talk about the great scope without talking about the middle scope. You cannot really talk about the middle scope without the small scope. So that's to be checked, no, if they would like to continue with the middle scope, or if they want to hear right from the great scope. Like with you people, with you two, I would go back. I would then go on to the grade scope. But if there's people who don't have that information, then because I guess you two will also not make a big discussion group the next Tuesday, I guess. I don't know if you use this video, you recorded me now. I mean, if people are coming, maybe you can just do that. If there's people interested next Tuesday, just watch this here and then discuss that.
Yes, we have the recording of the teaching.
Yeah. And then maybe we see from there how many may come to this discussion group.
Yeah,
And
advertise it as watching the video of your teaching and then discussing afterwards.
okay, cool.
So then we can get information if they will like to continue with the higher scope or to get another teaching of the medium scope.
Yeah, explore that and then write me an email what you prefer. And as I always said, I would be very happy if there's questions coming out of this discussion groups that need answering. Then just write me those as well, and I can talk about them as well.
All right.
Right? How's the weather in Cluj? In Cluj?
Yeah, today it was really cold.
Yeah?
Till 3 o'clock, actually.
What was that? 3 degrees? No?
Yes.
It was unusually cold
Ah.
and very foggy.
Just to cheer you up, we had 17 degrees here today. And the birds are singing. It's like spring.
I feel we will have another month of bad weather, cold weather, and then spring will come.
Is this exceptional or is it normal? Is it normal that it's cold in February?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Normal,
normal.
huh? Yeah.
By
There's
the middle
snow?
of March,
No.
feels
Snow?
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we have some.
Okay.
We are really fed up of winter.
You're fed up. See, this is some sorrow for you, you know. You need to be really fed up, then you can practice the path, and then you get out of it. There's no snow in Nirvana. I don't know about that actually. Maybe there is snow in Nirvana because Nirvana is not a place; it's an inner state. So maybe you can be in Cluj and be in Nirvana, and it snows. You know. Marius, you said you would come to Nalanda at one point in this year. When is this
Yeah,
happening?
yes, this is my plan. I still plan it. I don't know when to come. Maybe in summer. My idea is to come in August. Will you be in August in Nalanda?
In the second half, I will be here, yeah. In the second half of August, because we have a range retreat from the 15th August onwards, and then we have teachings there. In the first half, I will be home. In July, we have Lamrim retreat in Nalanda. Yeah? If any of you are interested, we do 3 portions. We have a Western Geshe living with us since some time. So he's going to do the first 10 days. I'm going to do middle 9 days, and then Venerable Gelsin is doing another 9 days or 10 days. I don't know. In the end, so it's going to be together like 4 weeks. That's I just mentioned that.
Yeah, I can be an option too. June is very busy for us, and then we take a break for the summer,
Yes.
July or August. I will let you know, and I would really like to meet you in Nalanda. I would also
Yes.
like to learn about making stew pots and stuff with gas in the mountains. So
Yeah, we
maybe
have this.
I would say for a week or so. But
All right. Yeah, you bring everybody with you. We come
okay.
together. Yeah. Okay,
Anyway,
people. Then
see you next
that's
time.
it. That's it for today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And see you next
See you in 2 weeks then.
week. Yes.
Take care.
Thank
Thank
you and
you.
Bye bye.
supper.
Bye.
Bye.
Suffer wisely.